Have you ever witnessed a magic performance that was so astonishing that you felt compelled to unravel its secrets? These acts can range from daring bow and arrow feats to the seemingly impossible act of swallowing objects whole. Often, the explanation behind these tricks can be as fascinating as the illusions themselves. So don your top hat and grab a rabbit as we take a peek behind the scenes of some of the most perilous magic tricks in the world. The water torture escape is one of the most well-known magic tricks that has thrilled audiences since Harry Houdini's first performed it in 1911. The trick involves a magician being handcuffed and placed in a metal square with doors that are locked shut with padlocks. The square is then raised into the air with chains and lowered into a glass tank filled with water. The magician must escape from the tank before drowning while the onlookers hold their breath. To keep their heart rate low and avoid passing out, the magician must remain calm before and during the trick. However, the real secret lies in the lid of the tank. The padlocks of the door are real, but the assistant slides out the bolts from the fastening hinges of the lid, making it possible for the magician to open the door. When the curtains hide the tank, the magician uses a hidden handle to pull themselves up, take a breath, and return underwater before the curtain rises slightly, revealing them pretending to struggle. Then the curtains are lowered and the magician uses rigid handcuffs to free themselves, open the ankle doors and pull themselves out into position for the grand reveal. While the magicians typically do not reveal their tricks, the water torture escape has become an exception, and the explanation is intriguing as the trick itself. Box of Spears. In this classic and dangerous magic trick, an assistant climbs into a cardboard box, which is then pierced by several spears at different angles. As the audience grows suspicious about why no spears have been driven directly towards into the box, the magician surprises them by making one final insertion. Plunging a spear straight down when avoiding the person inside the box seems impossible. But then the spears are removed, and the assistant emerges unharmed, performing a miraculous escape. To make this trick possible, the assistant must lie as flat as possible inside the box, under two strong rubber flaps that redirect incoming spears that get too close. Sometimes, the assistant also wears a protective vest for added safety. The final downward-driven spear is inserted into the box, slower than the others, giving the assistant time to flip onto their back and see where it's coming from. Then they can maneuver themselves to dodge it or subtly change its course if necessary. Finally, the assistant climbs out of the box, and the box is opened up to reveal no trickery inside. With the protective rubber flaps covered by a cardboard layer, the trick remains a mystery to the audience. Blindfolded swordplay. Few tricks can keep an audience on the edge of their seats, like using a katana to cut a pineapple on top of someone's head, especially when the magician is blindfolded. The trick typically involves the magician wrapping layers of gauze, black tape, and metal foil over their eyes. Then, with a volunteer standing in front of them with a pineapple on their head, the magician shows off their extrasensory powers and cuts the fruit cleanly in half, without harming the volunteer. Although it seems like a death-defying feat, the trick is surprisingly simple and relies on a little bit of sleight of hand. When the magician wraps their head, they leave the tape slightly loose, which allows them to subtly pull the gauze and tape down below their eyes. As for the foil, there are two options. The magician can use metal foil with tiny holes, invisible to the audience, to allow some light through for visibility, or they can use one-sided silver window film, which acts like a one-way mirror for the latter option. The magician shows the audience two sheets of this film, pressed together back-to-back to appear like regular foil. But when placed on the head, one sheet is pulled further around to separate from the other, enabling the magician to see through it, with their vision unobstructed. The magician lines up their shot and strikes the pineapple, which is already pre-cut almost all the way through. This ensures that it breaks cleanly and realistically when struck. The katana does not need to be sharp. and the trick is performed safely to ensure no harm comes to the volunteer. Balloon swallowing. The act of swallowing balloons, commonly seen at children's parties around the world, is a visually impressive trick that actually does not involve any swallowing at all. The secret is to take an uninflated balloon, pierce it twice all the way through near the end with a needle to create 4 tiny holes, and then inflate it slowly. The performer then presses the pierced end against their tongue and pushes the balloon into their mouth while rolling it up to make it as small as possible, creating the illusion that it has been swallowed. In some cases, the performer will bring the balloon back out re-inflated, which requires swapping the deflated balloon for a partially inflated balloon, with its end tied that is small enough to hide in the hand during the swap. This new balloon is also prepared to be inflated by blowing air into the tiny holes while the magician creates an airtight seal with their mouth. Alternatively, some magicians use small pumps hidden in their sleeve to inflate the balloon from the other end, which is easier to conceal as the trick draws attention to their mouth instead. However, it is not advisable to try this trick if you have a black nose, as you might accidentally swallow the balloon for real. Sword swallowing, on the other hand, can be approached in 2 ways. Sword swallowing. One of the classic illusions in magic is sword swallowing. The less impressive method involves using a gimmick sword that rolls up against the tongue when pressure is applied. It may look effective to the audience, but the top professional sword swallowers perform the trick for real. Not in the same way as swallowing food. It requires years of practice to learn how to relax the upper esophageal sphincter and suppresses the gag reflex. Moreover, one must align the body carefully to avoid any damage to the delicate linings inside. During the process of pushing the sword down and pulling it out, total calmness must be maintained. Even a shaky hand could cause harm to the esophageal lining, heart, and lungs, as the sword moves within millimeters of them. While none of the tricks in this video are safe to try, sword swallowing is particularly dangerous and should be left to the professionals. Cutting half. Dividing a person in half had been a classic magic trick for centuries, particularly the sewing a woman in half trick. Here's how it works. A willing assistant climbs into a long wooden box, which is then closed by the magician. Using a saw blade of some kind, the magician appears to cut the assistant in half, yet there's no blood or gore. The assistant isn't in pain and can even move their feet when the 2 halves of the box are separated. But how is this possible? It's actually quite simple. When the assistant climbs into the box, their legs don't stick out the other end. Another assistant is already positioned at the bottom of the box, legs pulled in, ready to extend them out when the first assistant climbs in. The first assistant tucks their leg under or pulls them up, creating a clear center for cutting. 2 metal blades are often inserted into the box to demonstrate separation, but they mainly cover the inside of each half of the box from view. Modern magicians have expanded upon this trick by setting it up traditionally, then lowering the walls of the box before cutting. In this version, the magician lies on their front and tucks their knees under their body into a hidden compartment inside the table while the walls of the box are still up. The assistant providing the legs is squeezed into the right side of the table, made possible by the table's sloping shape. After the saw blade comes down, the 2 halves are pulled apart for striking effect. Some magicians go further and appear to walk while cut in half, but it's just a matter of body positioning. The illusion is created by twisting the body inside a specially prepared outfit with metal supports to help balance and lessen the strain from crouching. It's a fantastic reinterpretation of the classic trick, but the illusion still relies on the legs. Apples and arrows. Belgian magician Aaron Crow has a remarkable performance involving apples, bows, and arrows that impresses audiences. The illusion begins with Crow cutting out the core of an apple and placing a ring inside before replacing the core. He then invites a volunteer to stand in the center of the stage, holding the apple on a tray on their head. Crow unveils a target at the back of the stage, hinting that he will shoot an arrow through the apple and hit the target. To the audience's surprise, The apple splits as the arrow passes through it and lands in the center of the target. And more impressively, the ring is revealed to be pinned to the target board as the arrow passed through the apple. However, the secret behind the illusion is quite clever. Firstly, the arrow is actually a piece of elastic that looks like an arrow when stretched and pulled taut, but it retracts into the bow when released. A hidden knife inside the tray holding the apple slices through it. As soon as the elastic is released and disappears from view, a spring-loaded arrow concealed into a slit into the target board is released simultaneously, creating the impression that arrow has just landed on the board. As for the ring, Aaron secretly removes it from the apple core, hiding it in his hand, and then secures it onto concealed arrow before revealing the target. The level of creativity that goes into this trick is impressive, and the explanation is almost as fascinating as the illusion itself. Close shave. While some magic tricks rely on big explosive spectacle to amaze the audience, others keep them on the edge of their seats by creating a real sense of fear for the magician's safety. This is precisely the case with the swallowing razor blades trick that was pioneered by Japanese magician Tanba. His nail-biting performances involve first swallowing several razor blades, which he demonstrated are real by getting a volunteer to cut paper with one on stage beforehand. After swallowing the first batch, he shows the audience his tongue to prove that they're gone down before grabbing a handful of about a dozen more. To the audience's horror, he swallows all those too and washes them down with a shot of green absinthe. Finally, he pulls a load of red strings into his mouth, moves it around inside, and then delivers the impossible. He pulls the end of the string, and out it comes, threaded through over a dozen razor blades, all at perfectly spaced intervals. It's an incredible trick, but did he really swallow all those blades and tie them to the string inside his own body? Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how squeamish you are, the answer is no. The first few razor blades that Tanba appears to swallow are indeed real, though like blunted to prevent the trick from being too dangerous. When his volunteer cuts a piece of paper to demonstrate the blade sharpness, he pulls the paper tight, so even a blunted blade slices through easily. Then when the first few blades are placed into his mouth, he makes a big show of swallowing them but actually moves them into one of his cheeks. As for the huge handful of blades later, he subtly moves them into his other cheek. These new blades aren't sharp at all. They're actually gimmick blades designed for the purpose and are completely safe. When he takes a sip of the bright green absinthe, which is likely just water with food coloring, he sneakily spits out the real blades. Thanks to the coloration of the liquid and the semi-opacity of the glass, only the most perceptive audience member would be able to spot the blades now in the bottom. When Tanba puts the string in his mouth, he actually stuffs it into his upper lip. The string the audience sees threaded through the blades has actually been tied to them the whole time. He just hid it from sight behind his fingers when he put the fake blades into his mouth. It's truly masterful deception. And that's what I call a sharp trick. Impaled. Another trick that instills fear in the audience is the impaled illusion. In this trick, an assistant appears to defy the laws of physics by balancing on the point of a sword. Despite being spun around by the magician, the assistant remains unharmed until suddenly dropping down on the sword, which appears to pierce through their belly. The assistant seems to be dead, but the magician gives them another spin to prove that the sword has indeed gone through their body. However, to the audience's relief, the magician then lifts the assistant of the sword and they miraculously come back to life unharmed. The secret to this trick lies in the assistant's costume, hidden under a fluffy top. The assistant wears a corset with a sturdy plate built into the back, featuring a port where the sword tip can lock into place at the right time. The sword partially retracts down into a hidden base, appearing to puncture the assistant's back. In front of the corset, a spring-loaded telescopic pole extends out when activated, making it look like the sword has penetrated straight through. When it's time to release the assistant, the process is reversed. usually with the assistant pressing the spring-loaded sword tip back into their corset. More extreme variation of the trick involve huge rotating drills that appears to bore through the assistant's chest. In this version, the performer is strapped to an apparatus in front of the drill with the front of their body covered from sight. A fake drill tip, which spins mechanically in sync with the real drill, is secured to the front of the performer's costume, usually magnetically. The performer is then locked into the drill tip behind them with the same reinforced corset backplate technique used in the classic impaled illusion. While the drill appears to continue spinning into the performer's body, it's actually being retracted into its base while the performer presses against the cover in front of them. This creates the illusion and the drill has passed through the performer and the cover. Finally, the performer is lifted in the air by the drill and spun around before being lowered and covered again. After the covering is removed, the drill has miraculously retracted from the performer's body, but in reality, the other assistant has sneaked it away under a cloth while the audience was distracted in amazement. Frog regurgitation. David Blaine, the world-renowned illusionist and endurance artist, has a peculiar trick in which he swallows a live frog only to regurgitate it moments later unscathed, often accompanied by water spouting effect. While it may seem like a hoax or sleight of hand, the truth is that Blaine has actually mastered the skill of regurgitation through years of training. By manipulating the muscles in his lower abdomen, drinking copious amount of waters, and disabling his gag reflex and upper esophageal sphincter, Blaine is able to hold the frog midway down his esophagus and then expel it through controlled vomiting. Despite its bizarre nature, this stunt is a testament to Blaine's impressive physical control and endurance. It's worth noting that this act is just one of many outlandish performances in Blaine's repertoire, including the notorious drill to the head illusion. Drill to the head. In recent years, some performers have incorporated a frightening trick in their acts that involves using power tools in a seemingly dangerous manner. Specifically, they press the spinning drill against their head for an extended period of time without causing harm. However, the secret to this trick is that the performer used flat drill bits that are completely blunt and unable to grip or tear the skin. While the performer appear to press hard against their temples, they actually use only one light pressure and intense facial expression to create a convincing show. Some performers even take the trick further by inserting the drill into their nose or down their throats, using the same techniques as sword swallowers to ensure safe movement. Although this part of the trick is mostly real, the drill never actually spins during this dangerous portion of the act, and sound effects are added to create the illusion. While this trick may seem impressive, it should never be attempted at home as it is incredibly dangerous and requires years of trainings to execute safety. Chainsaw madness. The next trick I will cover is more complex than the previous ones I've mentioned, as it requires a unique type of assistant, known as chainsaw madness. This trick involves a nutty scientist who appears to saw his assistant in half, revealing her torso while she's still alive and moving her hands. Then the legs begin to move as well, and the torso lifts itself up, proving its detachment. The legs walk themselves off stage, only to return and be stapled back to the torso and then dance together. The secret to this trick lies in fact that the role of the torso is taken on by a person who has no lower body, and is perched on top of the legs of a fully sized person, whose upper body is hidden inside a table. This explains how the legs and upper body are able to move separately after the chainsaw passes between them. Fake legs and trousers are used to prop up behind the torso when the legs walk off stage, and a switch assistant is used for the reassembly celebration dance. What did you think of this mind-blowing trick? Do you have any magician secrets of your own? Feel free to share in the comments below. Thank you for watching.